wouldn't be hard to enumerate the penalties that have been imposed upon her for having opinions. To my mind, that's an absolute abomination. She gets to have the opinions that she has. I mean, that's what academic freedom is meant to protect, isn't it? So I was appalled by the way that events developed at the University of Pennsylvania and terrified by it. Amy Wax, John, I saw you defending her in your column, so to speak, kind of a backhanded defense. You want to talk about that? Amy Wax is the law professor at the University of Pennsylvania, very controversial figure, a guest frequently on the Glenn Show, where she has held forth to her outrageous effect in taking anti-woke position. She thinks what she thinks about the issues that, and we don't have to rehearse what those issues are. If you want to, you can. But she was brought up on charges first by her dean and then higher administration at the University of Pennsylvania for, in effect, dereliction of duty and behavior unbecoming of a faculty member, and has now been duly sanctioned and has exhausted her appeals within the university framework. I mean, she may have a lawyer and be thinking about bringing some kind of a legal action if the courts will countenance it. But I saw you defending her.
Yeah, one must be principled about these things. And I really talk about Coates and just feeling it in his gut. In my gut, I realized that hearing about her being sanctioned, there was one part of me thinking, good, she deserves it. And then another part of me thinking, but no, she doesn't deserve it. And somebody black needs to say so. It's one of those things. I mean, just, to cut to the chase, in addition to extremely sexist things in terms of what she said about women, some things she said about Asians, in terms of us being the black guys, she has said things like, she has said that she has almost never seen one of her black law students in the top quarter of the class, and usually not even in the top half. I believe she said that to you. She has said the idea of a black man and a white woman living, in a white picket fence context is misleading, because the essence of blackness is, this kind of ghetto situation where, mothers having children by multiple men, et cetera. She said that, so in other words, for example, my life has been an aberration. Real blackness is, the sorts of things from, gangster rap.
We're not quoting her, we're paraphrasing, just for the record.
And then also she brought avowed white supremacist Jared Taylor to a class to be a guest speaker, and then had the students come out to lunch with him. And this is somebody who openly thinks that black people are inferior mentally and culturally, and this goes back to the bestiality of Africanness. And all this is very open. And she brought him in, I mean, theoretically, I suppose, as representing one view, but why him? What was the point of that? So that's what she's done. And also, this should not be technically relevant to these things in a legalistic sense, but I think we both know that she expresses these things with an almost recreational glee. She seems to almost enjoy throwing the bombs and shaking her head at all these silly people who won't let her have her say. That's irrelevant, but that was in my gut. But the simple fact is, especially given that we have seen what a Jewish student is expected to put up with on a campus. Of course, there have been criticisms of anti-Zionist or anti-Semitic statements on campuses, but nobody is saying that a Jewish student should not have to hear somebody yelling from the river to the sea into a megaphone as they go to class. Nobody is saying that that cannot be permitted. There's a such thing as free speech, and free speech can sometimes be extremely unpleasant. That's what we think. Well, if that's true, then having somebody laughingly bringing Jared Taylor to campus and talking about black people as dumb and bestial, et cetera, that has to be something tolerable. Now, if she were running and yelling into people's faces, that'd be different. But what she's doing, I think in 50 years, it'll look peculiar that it was thought that she needs to be sanctioned to that extent, given that it's about black people, which I think is the main thing that motivates all of this.
Well, what has this got to do with what Jewish students have got to tolerate? I'm not following you. I mean, are you saying if they'll make the Jewish students listen to someone who is an anti-Zionist, then they need to make the black students listen to someone who's a racial realist, which is what she calls herself.
Crude way of putting it, but yes, frankly, yeah. Or even if the campus protests hadn't happened, I would say that it's coddling us to make it so that if somebody does that 1/3 rail and talks about race, then that person has to basically be, what they really want is to fire her. They can't do that. And so they do the next best thing, because we must make it clear that we are anti-racist. It's all a little Ibram Kendi, if you ask me. I think it's condescending. Yes, I think that Amy Wax's views they're perplexing often. It's kind of like with Trump. They barely make sense. I'm not always sure where she's coming from, and I can tell she enjoys doing it. It's unfortunate. And it's unfortunate that a Black student at Penn has to be on the campus knowing that there's a person like that. But frankly, that doesn't justify muzzling her, unless there's anything else that she would be muzzled for. I don't get it.
Well, they're punishing her. She's been suspended with half pay for a year or two, if I'm not mistaken. She's had her summer stipend, a salary increment that is common in academia for people to support them over the summer months, suspended or revoked. And other limitations. I don't have the list in front of me at the moment, but it wouldn't be hard to enumerate the penalties that have been imposed upon her for having opinions. To my mind, that's an absolute abomination. She gets to have the opinions that she has. I mean, that's what academic freedom is meant to protect, isn't it? I mean, so I was appalled by the way that events developed at the University of Pennsylvania and terrified by it. What about my opinions? I agree with some of the things that Amy Wax has said. I think I don't know the facts about the academic performance of students in her class, and she's been admonished not to talk about that because it reveals, grade information by race, which is a violation of privacy, so they allege. Although if I were to say my Asian students are on the whole outstanding in my mathematical economics class, I don't know. I would be violating the same code, wouldn't I? Or I'd just be stating a fact. I mean, is it racist for me to observe that? I'm not supposed to observe it, or I merely meant not to speak of it. And the thing that really struck me about that particular incident, about her reporting about how Black students are doing in her classes, no one ever presented any data to contradict her. And moreover, the thing that she was describing could be thought of as a natural consequence of the admissions policies, which were preferentially using lower academic thresholds on the law school admissions test and the college GPAs of applicants to the law school in order to compose a racially diverse class in the first place. So the Black students are coming in with lower test scores. You might expect that on average, they would be exhibiting lower academic performance in the classes for which those test scores were predictive of class performance. So,
Yeah.
But Amy Wax has a lot of opinions. I don't share many of them, and anyone who goes into the archive of The Glenn Show and looks up my conversations with Amy Wax will see me pushing back on her, saying that there are too many Asian immigrants coming in or whatever. Too few Blacks in prison, because if they were in prison at the rate
There's
that they
another one,
disproportionately commit the crimes, there would be more Blacks, not fewer of them in prison, et cetera. I push back against that. But that's neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned. She gets to have her opinions. My job is to refute and rebut where I don't agree. Students' jobs are to toughen up and know how to respond, because she's not the only person with opinions that they're going to find noxious, know how to fashion their own arguments, assess evidence, et cetera, on behalf of views that they are meant to be able to defend. So anyway, that's...
Yeah, and there's an elephant in the room here, and I'm going to...
What is it?
Let's address the elephant. This issue of, where Black students are in a law school class. And as you and I both know, Amy is not the first person to observe that. There was Sandra Sellers at Georgetown who didn't know that she was being recorded on Zoom, mentioning it to another professor, and she lost her job as a result. This is the thing, though. This is the thing. It's one thing to point that out. And yes, of course, logically, you might expect it, given the way racial preference policies work, but there's a constructive way of addressing it. And so, for example, Richard Sander, way back in the aughts, wrote about the same thing.
This is the UCLA law professor. UCLA law
thing
professor.
Where you give the affiliation. I can't remember what he was or is.
He is a UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, professor of law who had a big study published in the Stanford Law Review about the impact of affirmative action in legal education, arguing that on the whole, there was a mismatch of students, so that the use of affirmative action ended up with Black students being at more academically competitive venues in the elite law schools than they otherwise would be, and adversely affecting their performance, because where you are relative to other students matters a lot. And that you'd have more Black lawyers and a higher bar passage rate if you didn't have affirmative action, because they'd be better matched to schools more suitable to their individual level of achievement.
Yeah.
This is Richard Sander.
And the thing is, that was constructive and it was genuinely compassionate. He was trying to get across that the current situation is harmful to Black students, and there would be a way that we would make things better for Black students if we didn't have this mismatch. And he meant it. And part of the reason I know that he meant it is because I met him back then, and we talked about it extensively. He was making a compassionate, constructive point. And frankly,
he was pilloried for it.
He was pilloried for it. However, there was that issue of the Stanford Law Review where they got 5 people to push back against him. And with all of their withering contempt and with all of their sincerity and with all of their compassion, the truth is, if you read all 5 of those studies, none of them made a dent.
They never refuted him.
Never made a dent in Sanders' basic point. There's a contrast between that and the way Amy Wax puts these sorts of things, where it doesn't seem like she's making any kind of, forget the compassion. There's nothing constructive. It seems like all she's saying is those Black students shouldn't be there. And then by extension, Black people are of inferior mind. And she's just content to leave it there. That's the problem. However, even there, I say that doesn't mean that she loses her job or anything close to it, because free speech can be extremely unpleasant. And so I wrote that, and I'm catching it from both sides, but I think I'm making a valid point, and that's why I wrote that, and I wanted to make sure that I said something about it. Some people seem to think that because Amy Wax's points are sometimes not true, that she should lose her job. And I want to say in response to those people who have written me that no, free speech might not be true. The point is you debate and you point out the things that are not true, and that's what a debate partly consists of. It's just, when I read about what happened to her, part of my brain, my right brain thought, good, she deserves it. But then I thought my left brain wouldn't leave it alone. And I thought, no, she does not deserve that. So that was my point.